Hello and welcome to Inside Athletics, a show all about high school sports in Robeson and surrounding counties, produced here at WNCP TV. I'm your host, Jonathan Bim from the Robesonian, and joining me once again are Darnell Coley, also from the Robesonian, and Brandon Tester from the Laurinburg Exchange. So guys, welcome back.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Yep, so for us it was a busy day today after a late night last night. So after Tuesday night covering basketball, now Wednesday morning we've changed gears from basketball to football for signing days with National Signing Day. And so before we get into the football later on in the show, let's talk about the signings. Let's break down what happened first. So guys, one thing that struck us most last week was we were writing off Darnell Sweat and saying how their season basically is done. Well, last night they proved us wrong in the form of a 57-53 win over Jack Britt, a Robeson County shootout MVP. Xavier Jones returned from his suspension and scored 15 points in the win. So Darnell, with Jones back in the lineup, what does that mean for the Rams?
Everything in a nutshell. I mean, that's what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. When he's on the floor, they're a totally different team. They win the Robeson County shootout. So, I mean, him getting another double-double, which he's accustomed to, getting the game-saving block and knocking down the free throws to win the game. He's everything. He's the pulse of that team. So, yeah.
Yeah, Brandon, you've seen both teams here recently with Scotland beating Jack Britt and beating Darnell Sweat. What do you make heads or tails of where those both programs are going?
Well, first I'd like to say that Scotland beat Jack Britt before he was cool. And also, we've seen, there's a lot of different directions these teams are going because Jack Britt obviously started very well in conference play. And then, we've talked, a whole lot about Darnell Sweat and about the ups and downs they've had. So that's a really good win for them going against Jack Britt. And then Scotland, it's just been very up and down. And, last night they went and lost against 71st in a game that it probably should have at least been closer than it was. So it's been kind of a rough year for them.
Yeah, Darnell, Darnell Sweat said after the shootout they wanted to reach that goal of 10 or 12 wins, double digits wins in a season, which they haven't done in a while. Do you feel like it's within reach now that they're at 9 games?
Now they're at 9, I think it's most definitely within reach. It's something we thought, man, are they going to win a game from here on out? That's what we thought a couple weeks ago. But now that they have, their best player back, their most important player, I would say, back, that's definitely reachable. We have two games, I think, that are winnable, Hoke and Lumberton coming down the stretch. So.
Yeah, so staying in the Sandhills, Lumberton swept conference leading Pinecrest last night on the road, with both teams pulling out big second half efforts in the win. So Darnell, which win was more impactful for Lumberton?
I think it was the girls. I think they have a slight chance to still win that conference, still win the Sandhills. They're a game and a half back, I believe, now of first place. So, they have 3 or 4 more games left, so we'll see how they finish.
Yeah, what could this mean, Brandon, for the conference tournament outlook with Lumberton going on the road to Pinecrest, which could easily be conference tournament championship matchups?
Yeah, that's going to be, big ramifications from that game. But also just the rest of the conference in general. I mean, we're getting to the point where other teams are really starting to compete for, the lower spots in the tournament. I was talking to Matt Justin, Scotland's coach, about that the other day, about how, it's really, you really need wins in these last 3 games. So, it's just that time of year where it means a lot more to get wins.
Yes, so Darnell, we've mentioned in the past about Lumberton's top playmakers, Jordan McNeil on the boys' side, Madison Kennedy on the girls' side. Are those the 2 best players in the county, you feel like?
To this point, I would say yes. I know we're going to touch on this a little bit later, but TJ Eichelberger out of St. Paul, she is coming on strong for the girls' side. But I would think, hands down, the boys' side, we have Jordan McNeil as the most consistent overall player in the county.
Yeah, so Scotland struggled last night against 71st. After defeating teams like Lumberton and Jack Britt previously, the Scots struggled to close against the Falcons. So, Brandon, you were there. What does this setback mean for this team?
Well, yeah, for Scotland's boys, it's, they kind of started looking like they did at the beginning of the year, which really isn't a good thing because, near the beginning of the season, they just weren't making open shots. They weren't taking advantage of opportunities, and that's what happened last night. They had a lot of open three-pointers, a lot of, drives to the basket that just fell short. And, that's why I said it probably should have been closer because they had plenty of opportunities to do so. It wasn't, like 71st was doing anything special on defense. So what it really means right now is that they now have to win these last 3 games, and, a couple of them are at home. So it's going to be, that's good for them, but they have to get wins.
Yeah, we've mentioned teams like Pinecrest, 71st, Jack Britt, Lumberton even. Do you feel like 71st is the best of that group of teams?
It's hard to say because they're all strong in their own ways. We've all seen some of these guys that have so many athletes on their team. I think in terms of being well-rounded, I think Pinecrest is very well-rounded. They can attack you in a number of different ways, especially with Bradley Haskell. But I think 71st is definitely up there with their athleticism as well.
Yeah, what did you see also from the girls' loss to 71st?
Yeah, Scotland on the girls' side, it's just been the same issues all year. And, at this point, mostly it's just getting another year of experience under their belt. They've already exceeded their win total from last season by a bunch. So now it's just, building up their IQ a little bit. And once they, build up their roster in years to come and get more size and athleticism, it'll help them out a lot.
Yeah, so staying in the Sandhills, we're just going to look at the conference standings right quick. First on the boys' side, you got 71st is 8-3 after their win last night. Pinecrest drops to 7-4. Richmond and Lumberton right there at 6-4. Richmond's won 7 in a row. Probably the hottest team in the conference, wouldn't you say, Darnell?
Yeah, I think so. Richmond is definitely one of the hottest teams, the most dangerous teams at this point. They have wins over the top teams in the conference, so you can't overlook them at all.
Yeah, Jack Britt at 5-5, still hanging in there. So there's 5 teams right there that are sort of still in the mix. I wouldn't count out Jack Britt right now, even with 2 losses behind 71st. Hokies at 4-6, Scotland at 4-7, and Purnell Sweat finally getting back in the win column at 2-9. So on the girls' side, when you look at it, it was Pinecrest running away with things. They were 9-1 leading into the game against Lumberton. So we'll go on that side. Darnell, what do you see coming out of that? The standings right now, Purnell Sweat all the way down at the bottom with no losses, but mainly those top 4 teams.
I think Pinecrest is still the cream of the crop there. You still have to go in there and beat them, which Lumberton did, so I think that's a positive sign. I do think Lumberton, Jack Britt, and 71st, they just beat Lumberton, so you can't exclude them. So that's a really tight race there. It's a very tight race.
Brandon, we were talking about Purnell Sweat boys last episode. Are they going to be able to get a win? What about the Purnell Sweat girls? They're 0-11 in conference play right now.
Yeah, I don't think they have enough consistency to be able to do that, especially in the Sandhills where, you have to be consistent every single game. I think it's kind of like the Scotland girls at this point. It's just about building up and kind of getting experience.
Yeah, so we'll change gears from the Sandhills Athletic Conference now to the Three Rivers Conference, where St. Paul's, a 7-woman roster, took East Bladen to the limit last night before the regular season conference champions of the Three Rivers rallied to take the win. So Darnell, what did you see from St. Paul's to come back or come in from that effort, just to have 7 players to take on a team like East Bladen?
To be honest, that was one of the most impressive things on the basketball court I've seen all year. That effort that group gave, St. Paul's gave against the top team in the region, most likely, because they haven't lost a game in the conference this year, and they had them on the ropes well into the third quarter. They were up by double digits, up by 11, well into the third quarter. TJ Eichelberger had 27 points, 12 rebounds, relentless. She didn't come out of the game, but I think one time, and I really doubt that. Coach Moses said that she came out one time, but I didn't see it. So she was definitely emptying the tank, and Diamond Sims Moore was right there along with her. They both fouled out, and that proved to be the end of the game there in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Do you think a full St. Paul's roster before the suspensions and everything could threaten East Bladen in the conference tournament later on?
Yeah, absolutely, because that gives at least 3-4 minutes of breathing time for TJ and Diamond, so they can, go to the bench, catch their win. They just look exhausted last night, absolutely exhausted. So I think so.
Yeah. So you mentioned TJ Eichelberger played well last night. Game high 22 points. Do you feel like she's helped herself out, her Player of the Year candidacy right with that game?
Most definitely. This has got her. I think it's basically caught her up to where Madison Kennedy was. She was just edging her out, I believed, in my mind, and now with that game, with that performance, being shorthanded, going against the top team, putting up 27, I think she's right there with her.
Yes, you also saw a product that's going to come to UNCP next year, Jatera Moore-Peterson. What did you see about her game that really turned you on?
She doesn't overwhelm you offensively. Like, she's not going to put up 35, 40 points or anything like that. But she will be consistent. She's averaging 15. I think she got 16 last night. She gets about 4 or 5 rebounds, few assists. She had 7 steals last night. So her overall well-rounded game is really what impressed me last night.
Yeah, so after suffering through 3 straight losses, after winning 8 straight, St. Paul's boys bounced back with a win against East Bladen. So, Brandon, what is the crew with this crew for the Bulldogs? How serious of a title contender are they right now?
Well, I think they certainly have a chance. I mean, the way, really both those teams are coached with Moses and with Coach Thompson on the boys' side. They've both been very resilient, and you kind of need to be that way at this time of year, especially heading into tournament time. I mean, it's just, if you can out-hustle other teams at this point, and just do all the right things, make free throws and things like that, you definitely have a chance.
Yeah, it seems like they have the pieces there. The real balance, that was the main thing, is the balance is key. That was the big thing. During their 8-game run, if they can return to that form, I think they could challenge. They took West Columbus on Friday to the limit with basically West Columbus having to come from 6 points down in the final minute to take that win. So, staying in the Three Rivers, Fairmont boys won their 3rd straight game last night against South Columbus, who was one of those teams on par with St. Paul's in the girls' game. Fairmont is still searching for that first win. So, Darnell, what does Fairmont have to get going for them to stay good right now?
I think their confidence, really. I think that's all it was. Well, they had inexperience in the backcourt, which they still have, but I think it's confidence. It does help that they do have their best player back now, and he's not dealing with an ankle injury. So when you have that going and you're still Fairmont, which they like to remind us and everybody else in the county, that's just going to pose a lot of problems for other teams.
Yeah, when you look at the conference standings, they're at 7-7 right now. They've got South Robeson, who's sitting ahead of them. They've got a couple teams. They've got Red Springs. You see Fairmont there at 6th. They're a tie for 5th with South Robeson. Is there a chance you feel like they can come from dead to the world to making the playoffs?
Yeah, me, right? Yeah, there's definitely a chance. They have it going. And like I said, these other teams, they're used to losing to Fairmont. So they have to get it in their mind that they can beat them. And it looks like even from last night, South Columbus is a better team than Fairmont this year. But at home, they don't handle their business. They lose to Fairmont. So it's still open for them. Still a chance.
Yeah, so Brandon, on the girls' side for Fairmont, they've really struggled. Haven't won a game this year. Having seen this program in the past, what can they do to possibly salvage, maybe get a win here in these last 3 games of the season?
Yeah, well, I think they need to focus on rebuilding at this point. I mean, it's not really about getting a win. I don't know how much that's going to benefit you in the long run, but definitely just focusing on the future, because that's all you can really do right now. That's going to be the most rewarding path.
Yeah, looking at the Three Rivers girls standings right there, you see East Bladen at 15-0, Whiteville at 11-4, who's really came on here lately, beat Red Springs last night. St. Paul's still in there at 10-5, but after seeing them last night, Donnell, you think they're still serious competition for a team like East Bladen?
Yeah, absolutely. They have the best player in that conference, I believe, with TJ Eichelberger, so for sure.
Yeah, so South Robeson and Red Springs both fell victim to Three Rivers Conference sweeps last night, with the Mustangs losing to East Columbus and Whiteville coming out on top of the Red Devils. So, Donnell, which losses looked the worst last night for all those 4 teams?
Oh, I would have to say South Robeson. They were 8-1, I believe, going into that game at home. So we both expected them to pull that out, and for them to lose to one of the worst teams in that conference is not looking good for their playoff chances.
Yeah, so you did a story on Cameron Worrell earlier this week. What is it about him that's really came along, helped him progress to where he is now as one of the top post players in the conference, in the Three Rivers in the county and in the Three Rivers Conference?
Yeah, speaking with him, just sitting down with him for a few minutes, you can tell where his confidence level is. He's changed, he's reshaped his body, shed a few pounds. He's still, of course, like this huge, imposing figure out there, 6'6" and 270, whatever. So I think just doing that, working on his skill level, his skill set down low. He's still a shooter, which he likes to remind us every time he's out there shooting the ball from 3. And I think when you add all those things together and his defensive intensity, getting blocks, think that's what made him one of the best players in the county this year.
Yeah, you brought up in that story that UNCP, a couple other JUCOs are right now looking at Cameron. So Brandon, what would a player like that help out? How would that player like that help out like a team like UNCP?
Yeah, well, it could help out any team who's looking for a post presence like that. I mean, he's not necessarily the tallest guy out there, but like Darnell said, he does have the figure for it. He can get in there and perhaps be a little scrappy, fight for some rebounds. And he's a guy who, might be overlooked, on the scouting report, especially at the college level, but he has a potential to make a big difference for someone.
Yeah. So we'll go over into football now. Wednesday was also signing day, where local products signed their names on the dotted line to play sports at the next level. Here locally, all the signees were football guys. Scotland had 2 signees, and Purnell Sweat had 1, and both Scotland and Purnell had 1 connection where one of those guys are going to UNCP. So, Brandon, let's talk a little bit about what those 2 guys for Scotland that signed meant for this program this year.
Yeah, well, first off, Tyshawn Thomas, defensive back. He's kind of a guy who went under the radar recruiting-wise. Coach Richard Bailey kind of talked about that today, but I think he's going to do pretty well with UNCP because he has a good mentality. He's a good kind of locker room guy to have there. Always kind of keeps his head straight, and I think he had around probably 5 or 6 interceptions, in his time at Scotland. He's a good coverage guy, and then Saheem McQueen, most people know him as Smiley. He's a running back for Scotland. He had a heavy workload this last year with Zamir White graduating, but if you've seen him play, he's a phenomenal athlete, very smart with what he does with the football. Kind of came down at the end to Western Carolina A&T, and then North Carolina had a conditional offer for him, and he said that he wanted to be in a place that's kind of like Laurinburg, kind of away from the big city, so he chose Western.
Yeah, and so Josh Williams from Purnell Sweat signed with UNCP, joining Tyshawn Thomas. So Donnell, what does Josh bring to the table for UNCP? Obviously a big body at 6'7", 290.
Yeah, there you go. You said it. Just a really, really big, imposing figure out there that they're going to need. UNCP, they didn't struggle. I wouldn't say struggled protecting the quarterback, but they definitely had times where they were overpowered. So I think he's going to help out with that depth that they need there in the front line.
Yeah, so we talked about their offensive line. They only signed a handful of those guys, but it seemed like defensive backs were the core that UNCP was really trying to find on the recruiting trail. How do you assess their recruiting class?
I'm going to have a chance to go over that with Coach Richardson in a little bit here, but I would say, not getting too deep into it, I would say that, being that they did have that depth there, that they did not have depth there at cornerback, at defensive back, safety, loading up on those guys couldn't hurt. So I think from that perspective, it'll turn out pretty well.
Yeah, so Brandon, real quickly, do you feel like Tyshawn Thomas is one of those guys that can come in right away and start for UNCP?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think he'll need time to kind of get in the weight room, fill out a little bit, but he has a bright future in a number of ways. He's very dedicated to what he does, both on the field and in the classroom. So he has a bright future.
Yeah, so like Donnell said, he'll have some more in the Robesonian on Thursday for the UNCP signing class. And once again, we'd like to thank the crew here at UNCP TV for their work behind the scenes while we got to talk a little bit about sports today. So for Darnell Coley and Brandon Tester, I'm Jonathan Bim. Thanks for watching Inside Athletics.